So Easter is coming up. To most, this is a day of celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But where did this come from? How did Easter come about? This video will go over the history of Easter and why you may or may not want to celebrate this holiday. Spoiler alert, this day has very little to do with Jesus. Before we get into it though, I want to quickly mention, as Christians, our number one goal is to bring glory to God and to reach out to lost souls. And if Easter is what it takes to do that, God can use it. But even still, facts are important. Background is important. That's what this video is about. It's not about some technicalities just for the sake of being technical. So if after learning these facts, you still feel comfortable celebrating this holiday with Easter eggs, Easter bunnies, and whatnot, that's your business between you and God. So let's jump in. What is Easter? As I mentioned a little earlier, it's a celebration of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. This holiday includes Easter sunrise services, Easter egg hunting, painting and dyeing of eggs, baking and eating hot cross buns. But unlike most other holidays, it doesn't fall on the same day every year. In fact, it's celebrated on the first Sunday after the full moon of the vernal equinox, also known as the spring equinox or the March equinox. This means that Easter falls sometime between the end of March and April 25th. So why at this time? Why is Easter so closely related to the movement of the sun and the earth? That's because Easter originated as a pagan ritual. Linguistically, the word Easter shares its roots with Ostara, also known as Eostre or Ishtar. Those three words are just different names for the same goddess, depending on that pagan culture. The holiday of Ostara is a pagan holiday, and it's celebrated even today. Depending on the year, it's celebrated sometime between March 19th and the 21st, and it honors their goddess Ostara. To celebrate, pagans put out food such as eggs and sprouts to celebrate the fertility of the land. That's because Ostara, or Eostre or Ishtar, is a goddess of fertility. Ancient pagans would actually celebrate this holiday by having sex rituals. They'd engage in sexual acts where virgins who represent the goddess were impregnated by priests of Baal. Yes, this is the same Baal, the sun god, that Moses and Elijah preached against. Now, these babies would then be born about 9 months later, around the end of December, when they would celebrate the sun god. Then on the following Ostara day, or Eostre or Ishtar day, these babies would be sacrificed. But why? You may be wondering why, how did something like this become linked with Christianity? This all makes sense if you look at the history of the Catholic Church. At 312 AD, the Roman Emperor Constantine converted from paganism to what's known today as Roman Catholicism. After converting, he tried to Christianize the entire empire, which still mainly consisted of pagans. Of course, people don't just ditch their faiths that easily, and he knew this. So he incorporated several pagan holidays and traditions and made his own holidays. One of them is Easter. Now let's talk about the Easter eggs and Easter rabbits. Where do they come in? Both eggs and rabbits are symbols of fertility. Eggs actually played a big role in the pagan rituals that we spoke about earlier. After sacrificing the babies, they get the blood of the babies and use that to dye the eggs, which were then placed in rabbit nests. This is the origin story of Easter egg hunting. This is some dark stuff. Another Christian holiday that's closely related to Easter is Good Friday. This holiday is simply the Friday before Easter Sunday. And according to most Christians, this is the day that Jesus was crucified on the cross and was buried. But there's a problem with this too. If you turn to John chapter 11, verses 9 through 12, in these verses, Jesus asks a rhetorical question. Are there not 12 hours in a day? Now, logically speaking, if there are 12 hours in a day, there are 12 hours in a night. We know this. In Matthew chapter 12, verse 40, Jesus makes an allusion to Jesus' death and the resurrection to Jonah being in the whale's belly 3 days and 3 nights. The Bible is not vague about this. It very clearly states 3 days and 3 nights. So what does this mean? If each day and each night are 12 hours each, 3 days and 3 nights would be a total of 72 hours. So if Jesus did rise from the dead on Sunday morning, the absolute latest that Jesus could have been buried is very early Thursday morning. Some of you might say, well, maybe it can be a part of Friday, all of Saturday, and a part of Sunday, making it 3 days. As I mentioned earlier, The Bible is not vague at all regarding that part. Jesus alludes to Jonah being in the whale's belly 3 days and 3 nights. Jesus then uses that analogy to his own resurrection. So let's talk about when Jesus really was killed and buried. In Luke chapter 23, verse 44, it says, "And it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour." This refers to the 6th hour of the Jewish day. Yes, the Jewish day starts at 6 p.m., but in this verse, it refers to the day as a day and night. This day starts at 6 a.m. This means that there was darkness over the earth from 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. 3 p.m. is when Jesus gave up the ghost, meaning that he died. Now, referencing that with John 20, verse 1, Mary Magdalene went out to the tomb on the first day of the week when it was still dark, meaning that it was before 6 a.m. So, using our names for the days of the week, this has to be sometime between Saturday 6 p.m. to Sunday 6 a.m., when the sun would rise. And by the time Mary Magdalene came to the tomb was empty. This is a Resurrection Sunday. Then, putting this together with Luke chapter 23 verse 44, this has to mean that Jesus was buried at around Wednesday night. By now, some people might be saying, wait, but John 19:31 says that the next day was a Sabbath. So doesn't that mean that the crucifixion had to be on a Friday, since the Sabbath would be a Saturday? This is a good point, but there's one key difference. This Sabbath is not the ordinary Sabbath. Verse 31 says that this was a high day. With a simple Google search, we know that to the Jews, the high day was not the regular Sabbath, but rather an annual holiday. We can also see this in Leviticus chapter 23 verses 5 through 8. The Passover is a one-day observance. It happens on the 14th day of the first Jewish month. It's then followed by 7 days of eating unleavened bread. That day after the Passover day, thus the first day of the days of unleavened bread, is referred to as the high day. That's what John 19 is referring to when it says Sabbath. So Jesus was not crucified and buried on Good Friday. The only time the word Easter ever comes out in the Bible is in Acts chapter 12 verse 4. Some of you may have noticed that the verses I read from are from the King James Bible. Now the KJV says, "And when he had apprehended him, he put him in prison and delivered him to 4 quaternions of soldiers to keep him, intending after Easter to bring him forth to the people." Other Bibles, instead of Easter, say Passover. And for those who are aware of the paganistic background of Easter, the KJV comes under attack as supporting paganism for using the word Easter. After all, the other versions use Passover. That's obviously the correct term then, right? This cannot be further from the truth. The key here is to look at the context of these verses. Earlier we covered what the Passover is, and we learned that following the Passover comes the days of unleavened bread. If you look closely at the previous verses, verses 1 through 3, you'll notice that Passover had to have passed already by the time that Peter was apprehended. Verse 3 says, "He proceeded further to take Peter also. Then were the days of unleavened bread." It's only after that where Peter's apprehended and put in prison. Then the rest of verse 4 says that Herod intended after Easter to bring Peter forth to the people. Purely chronologically speaking, Herod waiting until Passover to bring Peter before the people? That makes no sense, because the Passover had already passed. This is not a mistake in the King James Bible. Easter was a Roman holiday, as we've learned, and Herod was a Roman appointed king who was observing a Roman holiday. I hope you enjoyed this video and learned a bit about the true dark history behind Easter. Thank you for watching.